Hey everyone, Kevin here, and welcome back to my channel. So I wanted to talk about student walkouts and protests today. And yeah, I know it's a hot button thing to bring up, which is also why it's taken me quite a while to figure out how I wanted to approach the conversation. But with the most recent mass walkouts over, take your pick, immigration enforcement, minority and LGBTQ rights, abortion laws, gun laws, or even something more specific like school dress codes, there's been a lot of them lately. And kids have been walking out to protest for decades, with people both accepting and rejecting their right to do so for even longer, so this is nothing new. With all that being said, though, it begs the question of, and what I wanted to talk about, should kids even be allowed to do it? And frankly, it's a really loaded question these days, and why I want to talk about that from both a pragmatic point of view and from the perspective of a former teacher who had to manage when these walkouts happened, and all the problems that came from that. So, to begin and say right off the bat, no matter your perspectives or personal feelings, students do have the right to protest and walk out of class. Hard stop. This was affirmed all the way back in 1969 after a 4-year long legal battle where the Supreme Court upheld that students did not lose their constitutional rights at the school's gate, which was prompted by an entire legal case by then 13-year-old Mary Beth Tinker, a middle schooler in Iowa, who wore a black armband to school to protest the Vietnam War, an action which saw her reprimanded by the school. Now, that's not to say that there aren't limitations to students' rights when at school, and they can still be disciplined for missing class or protesting in ways which are disruptive to the school itself, because they can. But they still hold the right to leave a classroom to protest regardless. And for instance, we can't lock the doors and prevent them from leaving. Teachers are just supposed to mark them tardy or absent and give them the appropriate repercussion for missing class later, even though there really aren't any disciplinary responses from administrators these days anyway. But I'll get back to that in a minute. The point that students can protest is undeniable, though, and we can't infringe on their right to do so or say what they want within reason. But we can still talk about the practicality of them doing this and the problems walkouts create for schools and teachers who are, by definition, in loco parentis during school hours. We're responsible for them and their safety, but we can't really keep them safe when they walk out and leave campus during school hours, can we? Oh, and in case you weren't aware, walkouts actually are not covered under the First Amendment, since they are not protected speech like the black armband worn by Mary Beth Tinker during her Vietnam War protest. This is because students are required to be at school unless they are specifically excused, which is why we'd all be totally fine with kids walking into the quad or onto the football field or anywhere else on campus to protest in ways that didn't disrupt other classes, because then we know where they are and can provide effective security for them to express their viewpoints and be politically active, even at such a young age. But that's not what's happening, is it? Kids leave campus and go who knows where, or they stand in the middle of the street and block traffic, endangering themselves and others. Hell, just look at the example of the kid who literally got run over in Nebraska during an ICE protest that she left school grounds during school hours to participate in. Thankfully, yes, she wasn't seriously injured, but it wouldn't have happened if she was in a safer place to begin with. And as you can imagine, his mother is holding the school accountable now for this entire event because they should have prevented the demonstration, which, as I said, we can't do because it's against the law. But at the same time, we are responsible for them, aren't we? While they're at school. And it can be argued that we still are, even when they leave campus, up to a point. That point specifically being that schools may remain liable if negligent supervision allows the students to leave, or if a school fails to take reasonable precautions to prevent unauthorized departures and injuries. So we're living in a legal gray area at schools with this. And I hope you're starting to see the problem here after all of that. We have to let students leave for protests, yes, but we can also get in trouble for doing that, or at least blamed for not protecting them when they do so. It's kind of a catch-22, and teachers often get blamed when things go wrong or for indoctrinating kids to do this, even when very few actually are in the way people constantly claim. Check out my multiple videos on that. But anyway, the safety concerns for kids leaving class and protesting are very real, and many teachers feel very much under the microscope when walkouts happen, even though they have no control over them whatsoever. And even worse, they are expected to catch kids up on the content they missed after leaving class. And getting through the material they have to within the confines of the school year is difficult enough as it is. A friend of mine I went through credentialing with and who is still teaching reported that out of his roughly 36 students in class, all but like 4 of them walked out for one of these protests in the morning. His classes remained pretty empty throughout the afternoon, and he felt really jaded about having to find a way to get them back on track when he's already behind in content enough as it is, just like most teachers are who have so much to cover but only get 45 minutes a day with each class. Walkouts are very disruptive to the learning environment, and I really don't like how kids, administrators, or parents don't acknowledge how oppressive that is on educators to deal with afterwards, because often kids don't come back after the protest ends, making the situation even worse. Teachers are utterly overworked as it is, and this just increases their workload even more, on top of now fearing that these students will perform badly on exams and lead to disciplinary actions against them by their administrators since they missed out on so much content. And frankly, we also need to be honest with ourselves. Many, if not most of these students, are joining protests like this just to get out of class and ditch school for the day. Again, I'm talking about this from a practical sense, and this is probably the most practical point of them all. Though I definitely do not agree with the mother of that Nebraska student who said, and I quote, "I don't feel that any of the young people that were involved know enough about what's going on to do or set up a protest because I feel like they don't know what they're protesting." Because kids are more aware than we give them credit for, even if you disagree with their viewpoints. But I will say that many of them don't even care about the protest, really. Look, we were all kids once, and we all knew friends and other students who ditched school because they didn't want to be there. And like I said, kids know more than we think that they do. They realize that it's much easier to ditch when school legally can't stop them from leaving for a protest, and they can just walk out the front door without being stopped. It's the same reason why kids rule the school nowadays, too, because they've learned that administrators and their parents will not give them any repercussions for misbehaviors, and teachers are once again forced to deal with the horrifically bad behavior we have now as a result of them not enforcing discipline policies. Once again, we arrive at the core of all the problems in education, don't we? Teachers are the ones who have to deal with everything the school refuses to manage now, and it's burning them out at ever increasing rates. Millions of us have quit since 2020, and the frustrations from walkouts only add to all of the things we already deal with on a daily basis. None of us are bothered by kids exercising their rights. We're bothered by the lack of oversight and safety for students, and the expectations that we just have to deal with the fallout and muddle through like always without any support. Like I said at the beginning, the question of if students should be allowed to walk out is a pretty loaded one because, as with anything, it is yet another symptom of a long term illness in education we refuse to do anything about or even acknowledge. It's complicated, sure, but that also makes it easier for people to just ignore the problem entirely and just shove even more onto teachers who aren't equipped to deal or make up for these problems. Students should have the right to protest. I am completely for that. But we also need to make sure that they're safe, and we're not doing that either. Well, guys, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned something more of the nuance that walkouts and student protests bring to campuses nationwide. If you aren't already, please subscribe and click the like button while you're down there. Every little bit helps the channel, and it would be greatly appreciated. But for now, I've been Kevin, and I will see you in the next video.